The average running training plan can help you improve your running performance by up to 7%, but they can also make a lot of mistakes, perhaps by either leaving out important elements or by including too much that nobody really needs. That's why I'm going to make it really easy on you and share my proven training plan blueprints for peri and postmenopausal runners that easily doubles on that 7%. In fact, this blueprint helps our athletes improve up to 20% just because of how simple it is and how it relies on good old-fashioned human physiology. So let's see what makes this so effective. And we'll start by looking at the overall 15-week structure. Since this is the backbone of the plan, it's the structure that does most of the heavy lifting. And guess what? If this part of the plan isn't well balanced, it actually doesn't matter what happens in the individual weeks, because you're either going to get to race day underprepared or overtrained, or at the very worst, even injured. I'm going to explain each of these blocks, but first, let's talk about why following a structured training plan is so important. When working up to a race or an event, you want to have a structured training block to guide you. I like to work on a 15-week training block, and I break that up into 5 blocks of 3 weeks at a time. I'm going to dive into exactly what goes into those 5 3-week blocks later on, but for now, just understand that following a structured training plan is so beneficial because 1, it allows you to stay consistent over time. You also don't have to think about what to do every single day or every single week, and stops you from not only doing the sessions you like, but adding in, most likely, the sessions you need. And lastly, it will really help with reducing the risk of overtraining. Now that we know why the overall structure is important, and before we dive into the individual weeks, I need to touch on a big mistake I see most menopausal runners making. The thing is that we need to be setting realistic goals. We can't expect to be training or racing and performing the same way that we did when we were in our 20s and our 30s. And that is because our physiology has changed. We see a general decline in VO2 max, we see a decline in lean muscle mass, as well as in cardiac output and your mitochondrial density. What does that mean? Fancy words. Your mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell. That's where we get all our energy from. And as we age, the density of that mitochondria and the number of that mitochondria decline. And that has a direct correlation, or is a causation, towards why we are slowing down as we get older. The decline in lean muscle mass means that aside from just getting generally slower, your heart has cardiac muscle, and that is why your cardiac output goes down. The heart can't pump out as much blood as it used to, again, directly affecting our endurance performance and making us slower. And so this is why we need to make sure that we are training for the correct goal and picking the correct training plan to match that. Now you know why choosing the wrong plan doesn't work for you. Let's look at why this plan works so well for peri and postmenopausal female runners, and part of that has to do with what happens at a weekly basis. I mentioned earlier around those 5 3-week training blocks that go into the 15-week training plan. How we build and structure that is quite specific. We progress the training week on week. Week 1, starting off progressing onto a higher load in week 2, and then in week 3, just reducing the load a little bit, and that is our recovery weeks. That is your 1 3-week block, and then we move into the next 3-week block. Again, progressing on what was done in this first week or in this first block. This is really key and is quite dependent on the plans you are following, what happens in each of these 3-week blocks. In order to understand what goes on daily on a week-to-week basis, you have to understand my philosophy of training. I work off a polarized theory of training, which means around 80% of our training is done at an easy effort or easy pace, and 20% is done at a higher intensity. This, of course, can vary to your running ability, your running experience, and your age as well. But for the most part, there are 4 running days within a week, of which 1 will be a higher intensity, 2 will be easy runs, and 1 will be a long run. So 4 days of running, but I also, of course, want to incorporate some strength training into there. So you'll be doing strength training on a number of days. But lastly, and more importantly, we really have to balance all of this with our recovery and our rest days. And so it's really important to have one full day of rest a week. I often get asked the question, well, Shona, you're telling me to run 4 times a week, and I'm so used to running 5 or 6 or 7 times a week. Can I perhaps use cross training to aid or substitute this? And the answer is yes, you can. You can substitute a run that you used to do and add in some cross training. So something that is non-weight bearing, like cycling or swimming, but you want to work on a ratio of 1 to 1.5. So if you would normally have done an hour run on that 5th day, you could then substitute that with an hour and a half bike or an hour and a half swim. It is, however, really, really important that you still have that one complete rest day. This plan works so well for the peri and postmenopausal runner because of these 2 things. The first is this: as much as recovery days are important in this plan, and because recovery is crucial as we get older, one thing we include are recovery top-ups. It's a week where we pull things back just a little bit to allow for that extra adaptation. It is not a week off. Instead, the focus of those individual sessions just change a bit to allow you to keep training while freshening up. Now, you may have noticed that I neglected to speak about those black blocks in this training plan up until now. Those blocks are the second reason this plan works so well for peri and postmenopausal runners. Before I show you what they are and how they work, it's important to understand why female runners over the age of 45 are struggling with so many injuries and running in constant pain. The reason for this reminds me about being on a roller coaster, and specifically the speed of that roller coaster. Think about it. You start off gently and at the same pace, and then at some point it just is fast and progressively downhill. The same goes for your loss of lean muscle mass over time. Through our 30s and our 40s, it's a general slow decline. And then from our 50s onwards, it is rapid and much faster than it was in our 30s and our 40s. And while this sounds terrible and extremely negative, there is something that is in your control, and that is using strength training. More specifically, resistance training. This constant loss of lean muscle mass means that you're asking your body to do the same amount of work with less capacity, essentially. And so when we do that in a sport like running, which is cyclic, right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, the muscles and the joints and the bones take a little bit of strain. There's an element of strength training that no one speaks about, and I absolutely love using this for runners. I call it foot core. Working on specific elements within the foot is going to help keep you injury free. Aside from the fact that we're runners and we want to work on the muscles in our feet, we also need to understand that the body works like a chain. If there is a broken link somewhere, it is going to move somewhere else and be compensated for. The foot essentially comprises of small intrinsic muscles that stabilize the leg and the foot, and then there are bigger muscles that are important for movement of the body, of the leg and the foot. When those smaller muscles aren't used very often, they become lazy and the bigger muscles just take over. When that happens in the body, that instability might cause an issue. And because, as I mentioned, the body is a chain, that issue might move up and you might get something like a knee injury or a hip niggle or pain somewhere else in the body. And so as a result, when it comes to strength training, I like to work from the core down and up to ensure that the body remains strong and stable, as well as from the feet up to ensure that the body remains strong and stable and keeps you injury-free for running. It's also really important to note that as we age, there is an increased risk of falling. The reason for this is that the neuromuscular junction, so essentially the messaging from your brain out to your peripheral muscles, starts to decline as we get older. And so we want to work on that and improve that. A lot of the exercises that we do are using things like proprioception, so balance-orientated things, but foot core becomes a massive, massive part of helping you reduce this risk of falling as you're running. Understanding that all of these strength elements are important, we still need to structure all of this correctly within our weeks. So, how many strength sessions should you be doing? The research shows that 3 strength sessions a week not only slows down that loss of lean muscle mass, but can actually reverse it. So you can get stronger than what you once were. And you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, Shona, your maths is terrible, which it is normally, but 4 runs a week, a full rest day, and now 3 strength sessions a week. How do I fit that all in? There may be a day where you are then doing a strength session and a run on the same day. Again, if your rest and recovery is not optimal, then we need to reduce that load. Let's take away a strength session or a run. But the most important thing for you now is that strength training is a non-negotiable. It has to take place within this week. When it comes to strength training, I often get asked, well, how much is enough? And I have a mantra here at Coach Peri. I often say 3 is the ideal, 2 is better than 1, and 1 is better than none. But the truth is, even the best training plan is only one weapon in your training arsenal. There's so much more to the story if you actually want to get stronger and faster, and I'm here to show you the ropes. I want to share my complete running through menopause training framework with you, so just click here to save your seat. In it, I'm going to show you everything you will need and what is possible.